Oh, I started to realize that when Brandon picked me up, I could play with those guys. And then when they called me up to play in Boston, I realized then there's a chance for me to play. And my principal, Daniel Mack, at that time, he kind of confirmed it because I got caught in a snowstorm coming out of Boston. I missed about a week of school. When I got back, they called me into the office and said, look, you've missed a week of school. We've been watching your school and we watched you play hockey. Take up hockey. You're never going to make up in school. So I was always thankful for he kind of made my decision to say, be a hockey player, not a student. So I always appreciated that advice. Well, it was exciting because it was the Minneapolis Bruins, and that was the old six team, and so we went into at that time it was either Barrie or Guelph, and it was nerve-wracking, but I was lucky because there was a lot of Winnipeg guys there. They brought down a lot of the old Winnipeg Brave guys, and so I knew a lot of guys at camp. So that was good, but it was making the team. How I made the team is I was called, the year I went to Boston for the one game, I was allowed to play another 7 games pro. So at the end of that year, I was playing junior, they took me down to Minneapolis, and I was able to play 7 games in the Central Hockey League. And I was a leading scorer down there in the playoffs. And Kenny Stephenson was down there. Cesar Maniego was a goaltender. And so I was able to get a feel for pro hockey at that time. And when I came back, I knew I had a shot at playing pro just because of being the leader scorer for Minneapolis at that time. And so that year when I went back down there, I was able to make it to, the camp was great, but I roomed with Joey Watson and Skippy Craik and Ronnie Bame, and, we had a lot of guys that were playing pro, Maxner and Harms and all these guys. So we were a bunch of young guys, 2021, but we were the young guys coming into the Boston Bruins, and Weston Adams, who owned the Boston Bruins, made sure that we young guys were going to go at the NHL at some point. So our team was young, and it wasn't like the old veterans that were taking jobs. They give the jobs to the young guys. So my training camp was exciting, but I already had, a couple of weeks of hanging with the guys. So definitely, but they allowed you to grow down there. They allowed you, so that we played 1 year in Minneapolis, and they moved the franchise to Oklahoma City, and that's what turned my whole career around because I was still a 6-team league, but in goal in Oklahoma City, we won the championship 2 years in a row. All your better young players were sent to that league, the Montreal guys, Detroit guys. But our goaltenders were Cheevers, Perrant, Favell. We had Goldsworthy, Pronovo, Cashman. We had good hockey. We went into Boston and beat the Bruins in a preseason game, and so we won it 2 years. Glenn Sather and go on. We had a wonderful hockey club, and Dick Cherry and Harry Sinnen coaching us. And so we played good hockey, and we played against the Savards and the Lemaires and all these guys. So it was good hockey guys we're playing against too. So playing in the Central League at that time, even though it was a 6-team league, was great for us. Learn how to play the game. Oh, you're nervous because you don't know how you fit in at that time. As you remember, when you're from the West, all you heard was about the Eastern guys. Edmonton was the only junior team that really challenged them, we thought, And all we heard was about the Niagara Falls and, the Montreal farm team. So when we played against these guys, other junior guys or first-year pros, we thought these guys are way better than us. So you went in there not really realizing, could we play against them? So then it took you maybe a month or so to realize, no, I can compete with these guys. We played a little different style. We're a little more tougher, I felt. They were more finesse. And then when you started to mix together, you realize, no, they're the same as what we are. They get better publicity than we did, but we can compete with those guys. Yeah, well, it was for the Minneapolis Bruins, but it was in, I can't remember the little town. It wasn't London. There was another smaller little town that we went to, and but the Ranger camps were in Guelph and Barrie. There was a little community that they had all the Boston Bruin guys there and that. But like I said, at that time we had a lot of the old Winnipeg guys because they had a farm team in New Haven. So a lot of guys went to New Haven from that camp, and some went to Minneapolis, which was, I guess, a step above the New Haven group. Oh, yeah, there was George Butterworth and Brian Siebert and Billy Percy was there, and just a bunch of guys that I played hockey with, But it was more the guys were going down there and have a few beers, and if we made it, we made it, Because none of us really knew if we fit in, And at that time, the Bruins they had a pretty good idea who they wanted where at that time from the Niagara Falls team, so we knew what our team was pretty well before we went there was going to be like in Minneapolis. Oh, sure. Because at that time you had Wayne Maxner, you had Pete Panagabko. You were intimidated by these guys. I mean, Kenny Stephenson from Winnipeg. You knew of these guys, and you're saying, "Gee, how do I compete?" But like any hockey team, all of a sudden you get there and you start to become part of the team, man. And once you start getting part of the team, then you realize where you fit in. And then coaching at that time, Harry Sin was a good coach, so he kind of let you know what your role was going to be. And in pro sports, once they define a role for you, if you do your job, everybody's happy. You don't have to do somebody else's job. I remember who was challenging me. It was a guy named Noel Picard that was a Montreal farm team guy, and it was in Omaha. And the guy on our team was Wayne Aggie Schultz, had played a couple of years in the Central League. And I was sitting on the bench beside him, and Noel Picard skated by. And Aggie Schultz had quite a tongue on him and started yelling, "Hee-haw, hee-haw." And Noel Picard could hardly speak English, but his head was the size of a football, skated over a bench and said, "Who called me hee-haw?" Aggie Schultz pointed at me, he said, "He did." And Noel Picard looked at me and said, "Who he?" And Aggie Schultz said, "Amos," from my middle name Amos. And Picard says, "I kill you, Amos." At that time, he was 6'4", about 210. How I got traded from Los Angeles to New York years later is who was fighting me twice back-to-back games for St. Louis was Noel Picard. He was going to kill me. And Emile Francis happened to be the game. He said, "When I saw you fight that guy twice, I wanted you on my team, Teddy." I said, "I wish you would have sent some help down on the ice. That guy's still too big for me." So that was in Minneapolis. That was a Central League. But then we went to Oklahoma City. I mean, we were lucky. We had John Arbour's there, Cashman was there. We were close knit. Don Cherry's brother Dick Cherry was a former principal and a bird watcher, and Jerry Cheevers and him hang out together. And it was the funniest thing because Jerry Cheevers had a great lifestyle, and Richard Cherry was basically a school teacher, just in mild manner. But they loved each other, and when they traveled in the bus, Richard Cherry would always teach Jerry Cheevers about birds. Well, we got into a game. There was a guy named George Connick who came out of Flin Flon. And he was brought in because he was tough. And he started running our guys, and he ran Jerry Cheevers in Oklahoma City. And we were intimidated by Connick. He was a tough guy. And Dick Cherry lost it, and he was a black belt, almost choked the man to death. Tears were coming out of his eyes. And Jerry Cheevers had to finally get on top of Richard. "Richard, I'm okay. And like Dick Cherry at that time said, "You don't mess with Jerry," type of thing. So we had tough guys there, eh? So collectively you got tougher. I lived with Glenn Sather. He was the original rat. I mean, he badmouthed everybody. He was the original trash talker. And he'd start more fights. And so as a team, we grew together. We all stuck together. We were lucky. We had a good bunch of guys, could fight, could play hockey, could stop the puck. But every one of those teams in the Central League, that was all your up-and-comers. Your Detroit guys, Montreal, Toronto guys, and Tulsa. So we all fought and we stuck together, every one of those teams.